Hey guys, and welcome to this video. These are finally done. Took me 4 days to get this all done, from the template and designing of them to actually making and cutting all these sleeves, printing and sequencing these. They were, it was such an adventure, but I think they came out amazing. They look beautiful. They look exactly like I was picturing in my head. I actually, as you'll see in the video, the template, I don't have it looking like this. I don't have the sequins in here. I don't have the clan part as well. But as I was going, of course, I changed the look of it and kind of the design a little bit, because I had remembered I had bought sequences because I was going to make shaker cards and things for my planner. And so I bought a bunch of sequins, and I think the colors kind of match really well with, or close to, if not very similar to, the actual album colors. So I think that worked out perfectly. And I just fell in love making these. I am missing some photo cards, so there are gaps in here. But at the very end of the video, I'm going to kind of talk through more on my designing of here. I'm going to show off all the templates that I have, because I use my Silhouette Cameo to cut everything on here, from these little pieces to just the squares behind the transparencies, because I just didn't want to waste my time doing it. It was just faster to print it, spend 45 seconds letting the Cameo cut it, and then just go with it. So I'm going to take you through all my templates, and if you guys want to do this yourself, you'll be able to see how I set it up and everything like that. So enjoy the video. So here we got our templates. I'm going to start cutting them since I've already done my sketches on top. Basically, when I make these templates, I just use some Avery protective sleeves, and then I just lay the photo cards on top of it and try to lay it out that way. And then when I find a design I like, I just take an Expo marker, Expo, E-X-P-O marker, and then I just draw around the cards. That's where you get the jagged lines. Usually I do a solid line for what I'm going to cut and a dotted line for where I'm going to seal. So here I'm just adding in, I knew I wanted to add some extra stuff on the side, since the oath card, there's nothing going to be next to it. I couldn't fit any transparent cards or anything like that. So I decided to kind of come up with some kind of a custom design with using, their X logos, the members' names, so they can be a little bit more customized and different for each one. So I just kind of printed a bunch of pieces of paper with, of course, I am my bias, his name on them, and kind of decided I'd check it out and see how it looked. I kind of liked it when I first set out the template, but you never know until you actually are stuck looking at it. So just kind of finishing it off. I'm going to cut some of the excess off the top and bottom, and then I put the cards in just to do a final test to see how everything looks. And then I'm going to seal up the last one, because this is a two-part template. Since the transparents are going to be in one of the two sleeves, and then the photo cards and oath card are going to be in the second or first one. And then I'm adding some pieces of paper to the background, because the transparent cards are a little hard to see. So I wanted to do something to help make them pop more, so it'd be a little bit easier to notice them. And then I'm going to do some final notes on what I think is working and not working. I'm not going to really do a second template. I just mark it here. Sometimes I will if it's a lot of changes, just to double check that everything's going to fit and look nice. But I'm going to go through, clearly mark a lot of notes on things that I like and don't like. And as well as because I want it to be as close to what it's going to end up looking like. So when I do my measurements, everything can be as similar as possible. Okay, so my template is finally done. So now, as you can see up above, is my measurements that I end up putting on the templates. And I'm going through and I'm marking at the 1/2 centimeter mark, because I need to cut that off on the top of one of the sleeves, and I need to cut a 1/2 centimeter off the top and bottom of another template. So I just and just cutting them and sorting them so I don't accidentally get them mixed. Alright, so after I got those all cut, because a lot of my measurements go from it already being pre-cut, that's why I wanted to cut them all first. So now I'm going through and I'm measuring to where the first cut line is, because you always have to cut your sleeves before you start sealing them, because once you seal it, there's really no way you can cut it, because you need to put a piece of paper between into the sleeve, because if you try to cut it, it'll actually cut through the front and the back if you don't have a piece of paper or something in there. And I highly recommend using a cardstock paper, only because plain paper, it will burn and it is not a good idea. So the cardstock is a little bit thicker and it kind of protects it from being able to puncture its way through it. And you just need to change that cardstock paper out once it really starts to make a digged cut line in there. So now I have everything logged out. I just got to erase the little dotted lines, because if you try to seal over them, it will just seal the color in as well. So it'll be kind of harder to get the color to come off the photocard sleeves. So I just try to erase them before I seal it. And for this one, I had to seal it 1/2 inch up, and then I'm going to have to cut the sleeve, because there's going to be too much of a gap. I mean, you can leave it if you want, but I thought it was too much of a gap, so I wanted to get rid of it. So I'll be cutting that as well. And a good thing to do is, you'll see my hand pushing in there, is just I'm double checking how tight the seal is, because I don't want to put something in there and have the seal rip. So those are all fabulously cut. So now I'm making my cut lines, since I won't be sealing. So these ones are going to cut to open up for the second sleeve. These ones are probably for my transparent photocard sleeve. So those ones are 4.5 inches up from the seal line. So it's not going to be from the bottom of the sleeve, it's going to be from where I sealed it. So like, here's the cardstock. Like again, I said, you're going to want to make sure you have that in there to protect it from actually cutting the entire way through. But since I did it on a couple, I can already kind of see the line in the cardstock paper. So that's how I can also make sure they're kind of close to being in the exact same spot on each sleeve. And then I also I'll just pop it. I'll try to put one thumb on top, put one hand inside the sleeve, and I'll try to separate it that way if I can't get it just by trying to pull them separated. So just make sure you run it across. I do at least 1 or 2. I highly recommend at least 2 times, because you want to make sure you let your heating tool heat for at least like 20 minutes, especially with these Ultra Pro sleeves, because they are so much thicker than the Avery sleeves that it does need that more time to really heat up, and it really needs you to go through it a couple times especially if you want a nice cleaner edge. And especially when you actually go to seal it, you're going to want to put a little pressure as well, because other than that, it's not going to really push its way through to the back side of the sleeves. So I'm not going to make you watch me do every single sleeve. So once I'm kind of done having my extra tips and comments, I'm just going to clip off and move on to the next part. So here now I'm measuring for the bottom of where the top sleeves are going to go. So this is going to be my seal line for the top of the transparent cards. Alright, same thing for this one. I'm going to be marking for the spot for my photo cards. Sometimes you'll notice I put a mark on the ruler, because that just tells me, like, sometimes my measurements are 3 7/8. Well, I'm not going to remember which line is 7/8 of an inch every time, so I just put a mark on the ruler. It's just way easier that way. So you just keep sealing it. Same, make sure you put a good amount of pressure down, because you can feel it on the back side of the sleeve is another way to check. You want to be able to feel the dotted jaggedy lines from the sealing tool, and if you can't feel anything, it probably didn't seal through enough. I mean, you won't feel it like you can on the front, but you want to make sure you can at least feel a pretty good amount of something, or else the possibility of that sleeve tearing back open, if you push on it enough, is going to go higher, and it's easier to try and fix it while the plastic is still kind of hot, because once it cools down, I tried fixing like some of my 17 sleeves, 2-card sleeves. I didn't seal it enough, so I tried sealing it again, but since it had cooled, all it did was it just made it look worse. It just kept destroying the sleeve, and like the plastic was melting funny. So try to fix everything right then and there. So that's why I'll feel the back of the sleeves just to make sure it's there, and if not, I'm going to run over it at least one more time with a little bit more pressure. So now we're going into marking the spots for our 3 Photocard sleeves at the top. I'm just doing a double check because the Ultra Pro sleeves, from what I can tell, seem to be slightly wider than the Avery sleeves. I think it's because the Ultra Pro sleeves make their seal lines a lot closer. I wouldn't say like a lot closer, but they seem to be a bit closer to the ends than the Avery ones are. Even though they all fit 8.5 by 11 paper, that's the size that I buy. But I don't know what it is. It just seems to always fit a little bit wider. So again, just make sure you're clearing off of your little markings before you actually go to seal. Alright, so now we're doing the lines for the top 2 red versions, transparency cards. So I'm just going to do the same thing, make my 2 little marks, clean them off, and then seal it. I like to do everything of the same kind all at once, especially when this tool, because you want to give it a good amount of time to cool down when you're switching between the tips, and you really want to make sure you give it enough time to warm up. So especially with the thicker Avery paper, 20 minutes, I seriously, 20 minutes, give it that time. I've done it with less time, like 10 minutes, and my sleeves have torn open. The chances of it tearing open are a lot higher. So give it the 20 minutes to warm up, and then just do all similar seals and sleeves or things like that. So like while the tool heats up, I will be making my little dotted lines or things like that. I mean, working with the Avery sleeves, like 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, and that sucker's going to seal no problem. Okay, so all of it has been sealed, so now I'm going to be adding in my little decal pieces, as I like to call them. So the little beautiful cards, so they ended up cutting a little bit too big, so I had to cut them down just a smidge on each side. And then I just slide them on in. I love these little beautiful cards because I wanted some kind of way to emphasize the album a little bit. So I just loved them. And then the clan fit perfectly. It just needed to be shaved down a little from the top and bottom because I wanted to make sure I had enough breathing room in that sleeve so it wouldn't put too much pressure on the actual seal lines. Like I always say, you want to give it about like 1/8 of an inch on each side of breathing room because you don't want to put it up too tight to your seal lines. So I got those all cut, and so now we're going to slide them in, and then I'm just eyeballing it from one end to the next to make sure there's about the same amount of gap space. And you'll notice some of these are cut a little bit smaller and have more space in there, and some don't, but it really didn't matter to me. I just wanted to make sure I had it in there and it looked good, and it's not going to move around too much. Okay, now onto our sealing here at the bottom. This is where it's going to separate between the blue albums transparent cards. Oh, I can't talk today. And the white albums version of the transparent cards. So it's going to be the ones of them hugging and the vertical horizontal set. And I am going to leave the little piece on the side because I wanted to make sure I had a good enough width tight of a fit, which is why I'm going to have that gapped piece on the right. Okay, so now we're going to seal the bottom part where the oath card is going to go because I want to make sure that I have that seal line there so I know how tight I'm going to have to make everything else on the other side.
So you just basically do the same thing. Make sure you clean your marks off, give it a nice 1 or 2 times over, and you just want to go up to where the cut line is. You don't want to go all the way up to where the bottom of the seal line is for the photo cards, just to the cut line. Alright, now that all the lines are done, we're going to go one member at a time, and we're going to be adding in all of the little decaled pieces on the edges, or on the left side or next to the oath card. So this part took so much time to come up with between the colors. I ended up deciding I wanted to add sequences after I remembered I had bought a bunch of these sequences for some Plan With Me videos that I didn't end up making, but they still looked really nice, so I wanted to use them. The colors seem to go really well with the color scheme for the Monsta X album. So, of course, this one took the longest to try and figure it out, like how many sequences can fit, because you don't want to put too many in because the sequences will put pressure on that seal, and you don't want too much pressure going on because it could rip the seal while it's still warm before it's cooled down. And then, so I used small sequences, basically 2 sizes. I think it was like a 6mm and an 8mm. I think those were the 2 sizes that I used. Oh, and I think a 10. Because I have 6, 8, and 10, but I only had all 3 sizes for like the clear. I was between a clear and a white, and I ended up going with the clear because I didn't have too many sequences in white, so I didn't think I'd have enough to be able to do all of these photo cards with it, all these sleeves. So when I was doing the top part here, since there was that cut line, I didn't want to have this flap happening from the distance between where I seal it with the name on the top to the actual cut line. So I ended up going in and sealing the cut line. So I ended up writing basically right on top where the seal cut was, if not just a lightly below it, so that I'm basically, you won't see the cut line anymore because now it'll look like a sealed line. And the template, I ended up only cutting halfway and leave that entire area open, but I thought it was going to be too much to try and push all of these little decaled pieces all the way down to the bottom throughout the entire sleeve. So that's why I ended up cutting it halfway all the way across, because it made it way easier and it was less distance I'd have to cover to try and put these in. The tool I'm using to just help push all of these pieces of paper and the sequences, if needed, and stuff like that to the bottom is just a very long paintbrush. You can use basically anything. I mean, if you have like skewer sticks or really anything that's long for the sequences, they move down pretty easy. So I just use my finger, put a little pressure, and kind of just swooped them down. And then just to make sure all of these pieces stay nice and tight, I decided to seal around the whole thing. Just so they wouldn't move, the sequences wouldn't end up overlapping on things, the paper wouldn't really move and end up overlapping again. I mean, you can do it double-sided if you wanted. I was thinking about doing that, so when you're looking at the back of the card, you'll still see the design. But I was like, there's really no point to it. I'm not really going to look at the back. But I mean, that's up to you if you want to do something like that. And then I just measure at the top the name piece because I just want to make sure it's semi-centered since it is all by itself there. And then I just tried to vary the size of sequences I used and tried to vary, but try to keep them the same since it's supposed to be symmetrical-ish. Like if I'm putting 5 sequences on the left, I'm going to put 5 sequences on the right of the same size and everything like that, just so that's just appealing to my eye. And then you want to make sure your sequences are all flipped the same way, kind of like with a contact lens. You don't want to put your contact lens in backwards. I mean, it will go on your eye still, but it'll feel weird. It's because these sequences, if you have them flipped and things like that, they can end up overlapping on each other. So what could have been like 2 sequences in the packet is now 1. So I try to put them all in the exact same way as well. Just make sure when you're sealing these two that you don't seal it too close, because what I noticed with some of mine, especially going around these paper pieces, is that if I made it way too close, it would make almost like a burning sound. So I was clearly scorching on the paper, and even if you're doing it on the paper, you're not really sealing the pocket, so it can pop open. So I mean, give it about that 1/8 of an inch, or you can, I just eyeballed it the whole way through. Just, if the space looks too big, it's probably perfect, because when you actually put the seal there, it takes up a pretty good amount of space. So it'll shrink that gap that looks too big down to like the perfect size. So I'm actually going to end up skipping through a lot of this. I'm going to kind of cut out, because I did record me actually making each individual member's card sleeve. So I do show them all at the end individually, so you'll get to see them all there. The only last thing I did is here, that little sticky note tells me what colors Kihyun's or whatever members it is, what color all their stuff should be, and then I have a picture behind it that I took, because I laid all of this stuff out. I'll show them at the end as well, the pictures that I took. That's basically a layout of what color sequins go where, what logos go with what, and what Monsta X names go with what. So I have it all planned out, so I couldn't screw it up. So at the very last minute, I decided to add sequences into the second part, and that little spot that was left on the end, because it seemed like something was missing because it's just empty space. So I tested it out on one to see if the sequence would even fit, and after I had figured out how to really get into these smaller pockets, you kind of just want to buckle it to kind of squeeze it together a little bit to make a little gap, and then use one sequence, just let it sit in the opened hole, and it helps the next one slide in way easier. So I recommend doing that. If you're going to try and fit sequences in these small spots, just use one to help keep the gap open, and then just slide the next one in, and always just leave one there. I thought I would do the same pattern throughout each of the 7 sleeves, but I ended up deciding I wanted them to still be semi-unique, so I kind of ended up changing it up a little bit, added a little bit extra blue into some, and added a little extra like clear in another, especially blue for IM, because blue's my favorite color and IM's my bias. So you can kind of just play with it, do whatever you want. You could put another piece of paper in here with it being something else. Instead of saying beautiful, you could have it say beautiful again in smaller font. You could really just have it say anything, the member's name, anything. I just liked the sequence because I wanted to add a little sparkle, because their album covers are sparkling and shimmery, so I thought sequences would be the best to help this page pop, since it's kind of flat colors. The transparencies really have no shine to them or anything like that, so I really wanted something to help this page pop.
Ta-da, ta-da! All done! The longest adventure ever. So I'm going to slowly flip through these so you can see what the final product of all of them looks like real fast. And then I'm also going to talk about the designing spot of it. And then I'll get into the supplies I used, my templates and things like that. So if you want to try giving this a go yourself, you can do that. So of course we'll start with my favorite, little I Am. So on the first page here, it was simple to come up with. I wanted the photo cards to be on the top, and then the oath card was going to fit in the bottom. The transparents, I tried fitting into this side area, but it was not working out. So I decided to do something different. I ended up having to put all the transparencies on their own. But I tried to make sure every single member had theirs was different on the left half. From even if it was the sequins were kind of in different colored areas to, you know, just their coloring scheme. Oh, I love how these kind of turned out. So when it came to picking the transparents, that was the hardest thing to try and fit, because all the transparents can't fit separately on one sleeve. It just wasn't working out. I mean, it was like the hardest part and the most biggest nightmare of making this. But when it came to it, I kind of wanted, since they're doing the cutesy little heart thing, I wanted that close but not overlapping, so that's why I put them into separate ones. And then since they have the one that looks like they're just hugging themselves, they're both hugging ones, I was like, let me let those overlap so then it actually looks more like they are hugging each other, like how that would normally look. And then this is the only one I have for the blue album. These ones have been so hard to find, but they have a horizontal and a vertical card, so it'd be like he's holding himself is what the vertical card is, or them jumping or something like that. So I wanted it set up so you could have and see that effect, because these were the only two styles where kind of an overlapping look I felt was going to fit nicely. But yeah, my template to now changed quite a bit from how I cut it and everything, because the Ultra Pro sleeves, which is what these are slightly larger than the Avery ones that I use. From what I noticed, they seem to be like the cut gaps are a lot tighter and smaller, so you get a little bit more space than you do with the Avery ones. But when in doubt, if I can fit it on the Avery one, it's most definitely going to fit here on the Ultra Pros. So, it just came out so nice. Alright, so that is all of this stuff. If I was going to give some new tips, now that I've done this more from the first video, I'll link it, which is how basically where I started on making custom photocard sleeves. Basically, the tools, with using the Ultra Pro sleeves, they are thicker. So when I came to sealing it, you really need to take it slow. Just grandma style it, just slowly, just drag it along. I mean, my lines in a lot of places probably aren't perfectly straight, as I could tell going through. I mean, some of these sleeves aren't all the same sizes, but it looks really good. You're never going to be able to tell the difference flipping through it. And I mean, I did it by hand. I feel very proud of myself doing it all by myself, doing it, designing it, and doing everything. But I think they came out amazing. And let's get into the supplies and kind of my templates and design stuff that I used. So after I made the actual templates, which you saw at the beginning of the video me making, when it came to actually doing the section where it talks about their logos and their names, this is basically what I used. I basically took the colors that I wanted, my light gray, my dark gray, my dark red, light red, you know, light blue and dark blue, and I basically made every possible combination with those colors that I could with the word Monsta X. I did it with the logos as well, and then I just reused some of the logo ones or something to just get the color combos for the name. And then I already knew the Monsta X at the bottom was just going to be white with a black X. I didn't want to go too crazy with Monsta X's actual logo, so I just put these up, lined them up, took some sequences and put them in place too. I'll do a quick slideshow of what the final product looked like as I was creating my templates.
So here are the designs that I used and how I laid everything out with the name, their X logo, Monsta X, the M Monsta logo, and the sequences, just so I had another way so when I actually went to build it, like I was saying, I'd know where the sequence would go as well.
So after that, I basically came down to, once I started making the templates, I need my colors. So here's actually the hex codes that I used for all of my beautiful colors. They're the hex codes. I grabbed pictures of the actual albums, put them in Photoshop, and used the eyedropper to just grab a light tone and a dark tone from each album cover. And then that's how I got my hex codes. So I'll also put those real fast here on the side or something with all of it, so you can write down the hex codes if you want to use them, and I'll put them down in the description as well. And then I had to size it, because once you actually seal it, your sizes can be slightly different than what you measure. So I kind of just measured them out. I did have to cut them down a bit because it was like the exact size. Well, it's not going to fit the exact size, so you need to shrink your measurements slightly so it actually will fit and slide in smoothly into the sleeve. So I basically had my beautiful sizes for the beautiful strip that goes on the second part of the sleeve. My red squares and the clan part 2.5, the final chapter that I put in the middle. I had sized that out because that was brand new piece, so that one I do a little design work with as well. And then I redid my red squares. I measured both of them to make sure, and they were, surprisingly enough, the exact same size. Yay! The blue one and the white. And that's this stuff. I'm going to now show you and take you kind of through my silhouette cameo template so you can kind of see, because I try to fit as much as I can on the least amount of pages so I don't feel like I'm wasting paper or anything like that. So I'll show you the templates on how I got all this set out on the least amount of paper possible.
So here is the first template. I have all the members' names on here. I did end up changing I am and show news later, so it will be on another template because I didn't like the color scheming. And then I have all the Monsta X X's on here. I was one short. I only could fit 13 out of the 14 on here, but I was able to fit 2 Monsta X strips on here as well. I could have fit a third, but I didn't want to get it too close to the checkered boxes on the bottom left, because that's where it usually, anything in that area, the cameo won't be able to cut. So here is the first template. For this one, I ended up fitting all of the beautiful words on it and the missing Monsta X logo that I still needed, since I only could fit, like I said, I was one short on the template before. I couldn't fit anything extra. I could add some more of the Monsta X word on here, but I didn't want to mess with that because when I was making some of these templates, I didn't know what colors and things I wanted yet. So I was just getting the pieces that I knew I wanted, but this page looks pretty full as it is anyways. So I just did the beautiful and the one X that I needed for the Monsta X logo. On this one, I ended up getting all of the clan part 2.5, the final chapters on here, except for one. I couldn't fit it. I tried turning it and stuff, and it wasn't going to happen. So I ended up filling it with some more of the Monsta X's that I needed. I didn't end up using that red one on the far right. I thought I liked it, but I didn't end up liking it with any of the other color schemes I was going with. So, yep, that was this one. And then this one, I did all of the X logos. For Monsta X, I did end up fixing Hyung Won's because his is symmetrical. His is basically a mirror image of itself, so I ended up having to fix his and reprint it. So I ended up getting some more of the Monsta X names on here. I got the clan part 2.5 that I was missing, and then I redid the I am and show news since I wanted to change their colors later. So that's all fit on this one. And the final 2 templates are going to be my square cuts for the transparencies. I tried fitting the white one, the cream color, on here as well, but it wasn't fitting. So I did the 2 reds and the blue. So you just print 7 pages of this one. So you print 2 pages of this one. It'll give you 8 squares, and you only need 7 because there's only 7 sleeves. So you end up having an extra. So just in case one gets damaged or you cut it too much, you're good. And then that is it for my cameo templates. So I'm going to now go through kind of my final thoughts and end the video.
So again, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed everything, kind of my walkthrough and steps. I know I probably ended up cutting out a little bit of making parts of this just to speed the video up, because all the video I had recorded was like 5 hours of video because I didn't really record my design work or the silhouette cameo stuff. But it was quite the adventure. Let me know your favorite part of this design or what you do and don't like about it. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. So make sure to like this video if you want to see more custom photocard sleeves, or if there's a certain album that you would love to see a custom sleeve for. Just let me know in the comments down below, and maybe I'll check it out if I have the album and some photo cards that I can actually work with, because I like to have at least a couple to play around with. And until the next video, bye guys!